In this module, we're going to be discussing learning theory, and that is a huge topic. Again, just like classroom management, it is something that I could really spend 16 weeks on, and hopefully it's something that you've delved in a lot further in your EDU 216, your Foundations of Education course. We're going to be skimming the surface of learning theory. But in general, learning theory is the way that individuals acquire, process, retain, and recall information. So why is it important for you as a teacher to understand learning theory? Well, first and foremost, you need to understand how your students are acquiring information, how they're remembering it, how they're applying it. So if you understand how your students learn, it can really help you in terms of differentiation. So how do you reach out to a group of diverse learners? How do you reach students on an individual level? So with that being said, let's take a look at this chart here, which goes over the 5 major categories of learning theory. I will tell you that there are approximately said to be 31 different theories of learning. That's a lot. That's a lot to try to process and understand. We're going to really be concentrating on 2 theories, which is cognitivism and constructivism. We're going to be looking at 2 different theories, Piaget and Vygotsky. So you're going to do an activity on researching them a little bit further. But I did want to just let you know, again, there are so many different learning theories out there. It is important for you to be knowledgeable broadly on all of those learning theories and see how you can apply them in your classroom. Behaviorism is one of the earliest learning theories. Many of you, if you've taken psych, you've probably heard of Pavlov's dog. So what that is it's a response to a stimulus. So with our students, if we present something as positive, they are more apt to repeat it. If we present it as being negative, they're probably not going to repeat it. So it's a response to an external stimuli. Cognitivism is more along the lines of how we think and process information. So how do we make connections? So it really focuses on how our brain processes, how we link prior experiences to new experiences. And again, you're going to be researching a lot further with Piaget. He's one of kind of the founding fathers of cognitivism. And that was in the early 1900s. And then towards like the 1960s, we get into constructivism. So it's where students really is about making those connections. It's very much a social learning theory. So how we construct meaning based upon our experiences, whether that be with other people or whether that be with our environment, really focuses on higher order thinking skills. Andragogy is something that we're not really going to focus on in this presentation or in this class because andragogy is different from pedagogy. Pedagogy is the study of how children learn. Andragogy deals more with how adults learn, and Knowles developed that in the 1970s. He felt very strongly that adults learn differently than children. With andragogy, it's more along the lines of when adults need information, they will link it to prior experiences and they will just focus on what that new information it is that they need. Connectivism came along in the 2000s, so it's a relatively new learning theory. Siemens and Downs were kind of the founding fathers of that. Connectivism deals with how we interact with technology. So how we make connections with technology, how we access information now in a digital age. So very relevant to your classroom and how you're going to teach your students. So with that being said, let's take a look a little bit more at behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and connectivism. Behaviorism, again, very early 1900s. The picture in the background here is Pavlov's dog. If you don't know about that experience, it's basically, or experiment, it basically went along the lines of if you gave a dog food and you rang a bell at the same time, later on when you go to ring a bell, the dog is going to associate that with food. So we found in that experiment that dogs salivated when the bell was rung because over time they associated that with something that was positive. So in the classroom, a lot of behaviorism deals with repetitive drills, rewards, and punishments. So how we have learners associate something with being positive, they're more apt to learn it. Where again, if they associate with something with being negative, that behavior is going to decrease because they don't want to experience that again. Now, cognitivism in the early 1900s went on to say, hey, we are more than just a response to an external stimuli. Cognitivism went on to say, our brains can retrieve information, it can organize information, it can save information. So cognitivism really deals with the connections that our brains make, how we can learn from our experiences, and then change behavior based upon new information that we're given. So a great analogy of this is think about a young child. So let's say a young child sees a dog. In their brain, they goes, oh, that animal is furry. That animal has 4 legs. That animal barks. So they can recall information to say and make those connections to say, okay, that's a dog. So some applications in education, we really want to focus on active learning experiences, problem-based learning to get our students to think critically, and then really encouraging learners to ask questions and then discover answers. So then around the mid-1600s, so 1960s, we move into constructivism. Constructivism focuses on the active role of learners constructing their own knowledge, so their own understanding. So how can students use their previous knowledge as a foundation, and then we build upon it to make new meaning? So one of the founding fathers that you're going to be studying a lot this week in your assignment is going to be Vygotsky, but another one is John Dewey, so you definitely should know that name. Considered more or less one of the founding fathers of education. One of my favorite quotes of him is in the background here. It says, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So we make meaning in life as we go along, and that is education. So applications, constructivism is considered very much a social learning theory. So collaborating with others, so group work, sharing learned experiences, along with cognitivism, problem-solving activities that really promote higher order critical thinking and to be able to apply knowledge. And then the last learning theory that we're going to talk about is connectivism. Again, this is very recent, came along in the early 2000s. Basically, how do we interact with technology? How do we network and make connections between people and information? This learning theory is basically saying there is a wealth of knowledge out there. It exists everywhere, but how do we go about accessing it, organizing it, and making those connections? So some applications in education, we will talk about this in this class, which is flip learning. So basically where students go out through technology, learn information, and then bring it back to the classroom to have those discussions and make those applications. And then also online collaborative projects. So how do we work together across geographical boundaries to learn new information? Now this next topic is not necessarily a learning theory, but to me it is just as important. So in 1956, a man called Benjamin Bloom came up with what we know now as Bloom's taxonomy. So what is Bloom's taxonomy? It is a chart that you see here, and it shows lower level cognitive skills at the bottom and then works its way up to higher level cognitive skills. So how can we use this as educators? So as a teacher, you can use Bloom's taxonomy to develop lesson objectives. It is also a great way to develop assessments. And typically what we do as educators when we're presenting a new topic or a new lesson is we start at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy's pyramid. So those are your lower level cognitive skills, and we really want our students to try to work their way up to the very top, which really gets students to think critically on those higher order level cognitive skills. So let's just look at this pyramid. At the bottom down here, you see remember, that is the lowest level. So can students recall facts and basic concepts, basically regurgitating information? Next, we go up to understand. So do they actually understand the information that they are giving back to you? Or all the information that they're remembering, do they actually understand what it means? Then can they take it and apply it? Maybe apply it to real world situations. So those are all lower level skills. And now we get into the top 3. So after apply, we have analyze. So can they draw connections to maybe previous learned topics or information? Then we have evaluate. So then can they defend an argument? Can they justify it? And then the last level is can they reproduce something that is their original work? Based upon that topic, can they create something that is their own? So I did want to show you this visual here because Bloom's taxonomy has changed since it was created in 1956. The original over here on the left-hand side uses nouns, and then what we have now know as revised Bloom's taxonomy that was created in 2001 goes from nouns to verbs. So verbs are actions. These are something that students are doing. So instead of knowledge, we have remember. Instead of comprehension, we have understand. Now, the big difference is you can see up here at the top, those last two levels have flip-flopped. So previously we had synthesis and then evaluation is being the top level. And then in 2001, we said, you know what? The highest level of cognitive skill for a student is to be able to create their own work. So to produce something, which I would completely agree with as well. Now, this awesome visual here is called Bloom's Digital Taxonomy. So since we now have all these great apps and all these great websites that can help us with our students developing those critical thinking skills, how does that incorporate into Bloom's taxonomy? So over here on the outside of this chart, you have all these apps and resources. You have the activities that are associated with them, and then you have your different categories of Bloom's taxonomy. So how could we take something like the app VoiceThread and use that for students to create their own story or create their own problem? So I would encourage you to maybe take a screenshot of this, save it somewhere, because I'm sure you're going to want to use these and incorporate these into your lessons. So with that being said, let's take a look at the assignments that you have to do this week. Okay, so there's a lot going on this week in this module. So I want to slowly go through everything that you're going to have to do this week. And then, of course, if you have any questions, reach out to me and let me know. So there's two major assignments for this week. The first one is a Learning Theories Venn diagram assignment. And the second one is a Bloom's Taxonomy forum. I did want to point out right underneath this video is a PDF. It is not a required reading, but I did want to post it here for you. This PDF, I will show it to you. It basically has every single learning theory that you can think of under the sun and gives you a little bit more information than what I gave you in this video. I would encourage you as a future educator to read over these theories and become knowledgeable about what they entail and how you can use them in your classroom. So that's the first thing. Now let's talk about the very first assignment that you're going to have to do, which is a Venn diagram assignment. By the way, Venn diagrams are a great way for your students to organize information and compare and contrast. And so you're going to be comparing and contrasting Piaget and Vygotsky and their theories of learning. So the very first thing you're going to need to do is read a little bit more about these theorists. So this document directly located under the assignment, that is a required reading for this week, and I will show you what that document looks like. It is a comparison and contrast of Piaget and Vygotsky's theories. And so it's not a very long document, it's 5 pages, but it's going to give you a lot more detail than what I gave you in this week's video about these two theorists. So after you read that document, you are going to complete this Venn diagram here. So I'm going to pull that up and show it to you. And you can type directly into the document. You will have to enable editing. And so over here on the left-hand side, after you read the comparison document, please list at least 7 features of Piaget's theory of cognitive development. And then over here on the right-hand side, again, you can type directly into the box here, list at least 7 features of Vygotsky's social development theory. And then in the middle, if you remember what Venn diagrams are, you're going to list at least 3 similarities between the two theories. So what are 3 things that they have in common? Now on the second page, you're going to answer these 3 questions here. So you're going to choose one of the theorists, not both of them. You can choose either Piaget or Vygotsky and explain how that theory would be applied in a classroom setting. So what would learning look like in a classroom setting, whether that be group work or individual? How involved is the teacher in each theory? And then how is the curriculum chosen, whether that be by age or ability? So what do these theorists say about what learning looks like in the classroom setting? Your answer doesn't necessarily have to be long. 5 to 7 sentences should suffice here. So that is your first assignment. Your second assignment has to deal with Bloom's taxonomy. So I wanted to give you more resources than what I showed you in this video. So this video is going to give you an overview of Bloom's taxonomy. And then I have 3 documents and then 2 documents and 1 URL down here. The first two documents, I wanted to show those to you. I couldn't decide which one I wanted to post this week, so I posted both of them. This first document here gives you a list of verbs for each of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And then I love the second page of this document. It gives you a list of learning activities for each level. And don't get me wrong, there is not one level of Bloom's taxonomy is not more important than the other. Yes, we want our students to be on that higher level order of thinking skills, but they still need to start at the lower levels too. So what are some activities we can get them to do to remember, to understand, to apply? And then what are some higher order level skills or higher order level activities we can do to get students to analyze, evaluate, and create? So that's the first document. The second document looks very similar. Again, I couldn't decide which one I wanted to give you, so I gave you both. On the second page of this document, we start down here at the bottom under Remember. Again, it gives you some verbs and assessments, but the reason why I really posted this one because I like these question stems. So how could you start off some questions to ask your student based upon each level of Bloom's taxonomy? And so then I also gave you a URL this week of Bloom's digital taxonomy, which I love this website. I would make sure to bookmark this somewhere. So it has iPad apps to support, and you can click into each one. It'll take you there. It has Android apps and then online tools based upon each level of Bloom's taxonomy here. So what assignment are you going to have to do? Your assignment for Bloom's taxonomy is you're going to choose a either specific unit or a specific topic that will be part of your future curriculum. And then you're going to provide either activities or assessments that you would have students to complete for each level of Bloom's taxonomy. So I gave you an example down here. So of course I'm a math teacher by trade. So if I was going to teach the students the Pythagorean theorem as a lesson, how could I take students through each level of Bloom's taxonomy? So down here I start at the bottom. So maybe students just state the theorem and then draw a right triangle labeling the sides. Then how do I get them to understand the theorem? So maybe students will use the Pythagorean theorem to determine whether a triangle is a right triangle. How could I get them to apply that to a real world situation? So you can see in each activity, I'm taking students up one level in Bloom's taxonomy till we get down here at the very end where I have students create a pictorial model that illustrates the proof of the Pythagorean theorem. So they're creating their own model to prove the theorem. So I would really encourage you to use these two documents that I posted this here to take whatever topic that you're going to choose. It could be a topic that you're going to teach in the future. And what would you do to take students through each level of Bloom's taxonomy? And then you're going to respond to at least one of your classmates, and you can provide either a compliment, you can provide a suggestion for improvement, or you can provide a question, or I would encourage you to provide all three. Again, if you have any questions at all about any of the assignments this week or about any of the learning theories, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.